Is your VA rating protected? It's a big topic that comes up a lot. You may have seen some posts that we put up, but let's get into it. So there's a few things to look at, right? You may have heard of the 5, 10, 20-year rule, 55-year rule. So let's discuss it. So the first one up is going to be the 5-year rule. So this is basically saying that the VA cannot reduce a condition that's been rated at the same level for 5 years or more. The rating is considered to be stabilized, and the condition must show sustained improvement if it is to be reduced. So let's actually look at the CFR, right? So this is just a quick thing here, but where does this come from? Well, we're going now to the CFR. So what we see here is we are at Title 38, Chapter 1, Part 3, Subpart 3.327, reexamination. So the 5-year rule looks at reexaminations. So as you see here in the highlighted, um, it looks at no periodic future examinations. This is the little highlighted part here that you'll see will be requested for in-service cases. No periodic reexaminations will be scheduled when these criteria are met, right? You may have heard of instances where you have a disability that is considered to be static, right? Your coach, you would have that information. Or instances where, let's say, findings of exams and so forth have persisted, that your claim, for example, condition has persisted without material improvement for 5 years or more. So in this case here, the VA is not going to re-examine you. Now, one thing to note here is how they have to do this. So if you scroll up a little bit, in order, for example, for re-examinations to be called, they cannot be scheduled less than 2 years from the rating or more than five, right? So that 2 to 5 year bucket is when they're looking to re-examine. So over 5 years, no material improvement, they can't go ahead and call for another reexamination. So that's really what we're looking at here, right? But here also falls in the 55-year rule. So in cases where a veteran is 55 years of age, except under certain circumstances, they're not going to call you back in to re-examine you, right? So that falls into, as you see here, re-examinations, right? So that's that part there. But now we look at the 10-year rule, right? This is when we're looking at now service connection for a disability that has been in effect for 10 years cannot be taken away, right? So we discussed reevaluations. Now we're looking at a protection. So let's jump over and look at that protection side at the CFR as well. So on that side of the house, we're over at 3.952 protected ratings, right? And it gives a lot of information, but the part we're focusing on here is service connection for a disability or death granted or continued under Title 38 USC, which has been in effect for 10 years or more, will not be severed except upon showing that the original grant was based on fraud or is clearly shown to be shown from military records that the person concerned did not have the requisite service or character of discharge required. So that's one of the things to consider there, right? You've had that rating for 10 years. They can't just sever it, right? Unless, of course, fraud is involved. So I'm showing this because I want to be able to kind of highlight how it all falls together. So when we're talking about not being taken away, it's a protection of that rating, right? So we have that. Now let's consider the other part now, right? The 20-year rule. So a rating has been in place for 20 years or more is protected and cannot be reduced beyond that level, right? So for that one, we'll jump over to CFR as well, and we'll look at preservation of a disability rating. And as you see here in the highlighter, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. It looks at a disability which has been continuously rated at or above any evaluation of a disability for 20 or more years for compensation purposes under the law administered by the VA will not be reduced to less than such evaluation except a showing that the rating was based on fraud. That's the common denominator here, right? So we've touched on instances where we're looking at reexaminations being something severed, and then in cases of preserving that. So this is where the information comes from when you start to hear that. So again, we talked about the 5-year rule, the 10-year rule, the 20-year rule, and the 55-year rule as well. Hope that helps. Feel free to look up the information as well and kind of get a deep dive into the CFR.